Good evening, everybody. I've got George Dodds with me. Fantastic barman. I couldn't believe it, George. I'm waiting for the bar to open, thinking, "Hey, minute now, Mark and Caroline Walk, Walkerman, what's
Wakenshaw.
Wakenshaw, yeah. I'm thinking they're going to open the bar. No, but the bar opens. Lo and behold, it's yourself. How can you possibly follow the Speedway when you're operating the bar?
It's not one of the easiest things to do, I have to
No,
say.
no.
It is one of those ones where you get to the end of Heat 15 and you go and you say, did we win? Which
Yeah.
this year, unfortunately, the answer's been no.
Well, it's the same question to Graham McCleary. I said, do you get to enjoy the action and, sort of take in what's going on? He said, no, because I'm too busy focusing on the meet. And I remember seeing him years and years ago. I think the first one he ever videoed away from home was either Pool 89 or the night before at Exeter. And same answer, just I'm thinking, I don't mind videoing a wee bit of one of the races, but to do the whole meeting, and that would be a bit too much for me. But anyway, and then how do you write a report on it if you haven't actually seen it? You're relying on other people.
No. It's. I mean, a report is my feelings, my opinions of what's gone on. It's an atmosphere as much as anything else. Speedway is one of your easiest sports to report, in the sense of there are 15 races, there are 15 results, and they link together into a report. It's far simpler when, like last week, I just get to sit on a little bench at the edge of the pits and watch all 15 heats. That certainly is an easier way of doing it. Doesn't happen very often at Berwick. There's not many volunteers, and we do tend to get shuffled around on a match day.
I was going to say, there's no way you should ever volunteer me to run the bar, because you wouldn't make any profit at all. I'd drink all the profit.
I think the ones who you really feel for, likes of Helen Dumble and people like that who work in the actual tea bar. I mean, they genuinely don't see a heats race. And I think Jamie and Scott's mother, Jackie, who back in the day did the same job up at Berrington. I kind of think in 20 years she's probably never seen a heated Speedway race, but she's been at hundreds of meetings working normally.
Well, funny enough, next question. It seems like our two Mr. Entertainers, Bomber and Bartosz Blair, are in a competition to see who can do the most guest bookings. Greg actually turned down the option last week of going to the Isle of Wight, apparently because he's not keen on sailing. So I presume that's what it was. But no, the one and only time I went to the Isle of Wight, when we got there, Peter Waite said was talking about the fact that they didn't have a mechanic for Stefan Mell. And, the Isle of Wight team have offered one of their mechanics. And he said to me, I said, you're a mechanic. I said, yeah, a motor mechanic. Oh, that'll do fine. So I ended up mechanicking for Stefan Mell. Never got to see any of the racing. Thoroughly enjoyed myself, I must say. I do apologise to Stefan Mell, and I will continue to do so because he scored a 0. And I'm sure it was down to my mechanicking skills. But
you'd probably got less if you hadn't been mechanicking.
Well, you can't get less than 0. Can I take you back to let's say Wednesday of last week? Shock news: Ben Barker. Have we heard anything yet about the result of this failed or a non-negative?
Well, because of that. They're waiting for the results of his B test,
right?
And obviously he's suspended while those results come back. It's like everything at the moment. They were given a 10-day clearance time on it. Nothing, and that hasn't been met by nothing to do with Speedway, just the laboratory that tests it. I believe they're using rider replacement from up at Edinburgh tonight.
Right.
And I would anticipate they do the same tomorrow night. It's a strange one in that he has the non-negative means he has actually failed a test, and I think coming out of Plymouth, there's no argument that he's tested positive for what he's been told, what he's been said positive. They say that it's to do with the painkillers he's been on, and I would imagine you do have a problem as a sportsman. You're responsible for what goes into your body, and unfortunately, sometimes even if it's a legitimate reason, there's a big list of no-nos that riders, sportsmen of all shapes and forms are told you can't use, including cough mixtures and things like that, because they have banned substances in. If I would assume that, like other sports, if you have a legitimate reason to be taking something, then you need like a medical exemption certificate, which of course was what all the kerfuffle with British cycling was over, the exemptions over the asthma inhalers and things like that. It's a difficult thing because there's not many speedway riders don't ride hurt. And I think you have to be very, very careful exactly what you take, and that you have the correct paperwork for it. Ben's going to be judged soon. I can't imagine he'd be riding at Berwick tomorrow night, having not ridden tonight.
Which is unfortunate, because I saw him down at Plymouth, and I enjoy watching Ben Barker. However, I am aware of the fact that within the sort of Berwick supporters, he's not their number one favourite rider. He would be on a list with likes of Charlie Jeddah.
I think that's harsh for anybody to be on the list next to Charlie Jeddah.
Possibly Edward Kennett. Riders that flatter to deceive. They came, they never did anything. And in the case of Ben Barker, did he not get injured? And then
he broke his neck in the British final, actually, when he was a Berwick rider.
That's right.
And he said he was out for the season. And if from memory, did he come back at Peterborough, somewhere like that, at the back end of the season? But in fairness, we'd already replaced him at Berwick by then as number one. But on the understanding he wasn't going to ride again that season. Edward Kennett, I think, is a bit unlucky. He came in short term. He never liked Shieldfield Park, but actually his performances for Berwick away from home were pretty good. And I don't think... I mean, this is where you miss Martin. I don't think, from memory, he did that badly for Berwick. He's one of these riders that since then, he's had a bit of a strange career and gone missing on a lot of occasions.
Yes.
And I think people are almost extrapolating back the reputation he has now to the time he was at Berwick. Maybe a bit unfair on him. And don't forget, in his in Ben Barker's absence, once Michael Palm-Toft scored a 21-point maximum at Rye House.
Indeed, yes.
He scored a lot of points for us at one point, Michael Palm-Toft, as a guest.
I'm going to say I'm looking forward to seeing him ride. I've never seen him at Berwick before. I don't know how he goes. James was saying it's a mixture, a bit him and Hans Andersen. Sometimes they're hit, sometimes they're miss.
I'm not sure Hans Andersen's ever ridden at Berwick before.
Well, that's what I was wondering.
I mean, Michael has. Michael does tend to get injured quite a lot. He's a bit like Uli Ostergaard in that he's had some great meetings at Berwick. He's had some fairly big offs as well at Berwick. Little bit of a mix. But I kind of think at the start of the week when we were looking at this match, and Palm-Toft and Andersen was still injured, and they were likely to be using a couple of guests for them, I think it was maybe looking a little bit easier than that. Although it all depends how they get on at Edinburgh tonight. It's a tough place to come back from injury, particularly Palm-Toft, who struggled up there as well.
Sure. So just going back to the Ben Barker situation, it was a drug and alcohol test, and I was just wondering. What is the actual detection limit for, say, the alcohol? Is it the same as like an alcohol test that the police would give? In other words, if you've got like I think in Scotland, it's like the limit is reckoned to be about half a pint. If you've had half a pint, you are then over the limit. So I just wondered what the detection limit is.
I think in Scotland it's 0 now, isn't it?
Is it?
I don't know is the answer, to be honest.
Sure.
But I'm fairly certain driving in Scotland it's actually 0 now, albeit 0 will give you a slight amount to allow you overnight. No. I couldn't tell you with Speedway. I'd be surprised if it wasn't considerably lower than a normal driving thing, because really there's not much reason to have a test if you're allowed a couple of pints before you get on the Speedway bike. I would suspect, without knowing the rule, I would suspect it's pretty low tolerance to it.
Sure. I mean, certainly from my memory, thinking back of all the sort of the drug cases, and of course recently, 2019, I think Kyle Howarth took cocodramol and was proven to be that it was just medication that he'd taken. But obviously we've had one or two other famous. Going back to Gary Havelock was banned for a year, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
And I seem to remember the only one I can ever remember being done for drink was the American. Was it Sean Moran?
Sean Moran lost. He was third place in the world final. Would have been 95, possibly at Bradford, right. And he was stripped of that. And I kind of think, again from memory, I kind of think that that was the start of random alcohol testing. Right. If you think back to the 1980s, the rumours of, particularly amongst the Americans, the rumours of the amount of drugs that were going in recreationally, normally. Certainly dope smoking. Michael Lee was linked into that, and later life perhaps suggested there might have been some reasonable links to it. But I kind of think until, say, the mid-90s, Speedway didn't really take it seriously as a problem. And if you read Kelly Moran's autobiography, he openly admits to being absolutely pie-eyed on a regular basis when he was riding from alcohol. And
wow.
And certainly suggesting he wasn't the only one. And I think it maybe got to the point where people were saying this really is too dangerous to allow to continue. Because in a way, a lot of sports, they only really test because they're after government or Sport England backing, and the testing is a prerequisite of that. Obviously, Speedway is not getting money from the government in any shape or form. So it's a choice to do it. The strange thing is there's obviously there's a line, and up to that line you're allowed to take X, Y, and Z. But after that line, A, B, and C are illegal. And I think with all sports, people tend to push to the limit, and every so often one or two will go over the limit, and they may be unlucky, they may not. I kind of think from memory, Kyle Howarth may have taken something like a Cynex spray, but it was one he'd bought in America where they have a different ingredient in it. So while it wasn't on the banned list in this country, or as a named thing, what he actually took, because it came from outside this country, contained something that was banned in this country, which is another problem, and possibly a problem for people who, as riders do, spend a lot of time going backwards and forwards from one country to another at the moment. Good evening.
I thought he was going to fetch the whole laptop off then.
Yes, I was quite shudder that.
He's a bit boisterous in our job. Enough. Thank you. Sorry about that, George. It's I mean, we don't want to dwell on it because obviously in the case of Ben Barker, we have to wait and see what the result of that second test is. Just before we talk about the British final, which I must admit, one of the best meetings I've seen, albeit it was only 12 heats, and I feel very sad that we didn't get to see the whole lot. But going back further, Leon Flint winning the under-19s.
Yeah.
Thoughts on that?
He's in great form. I mean, really, him and Tom Brennan, head and shoulders the best under-21s in the country at the moment. Not a lot between him and Tom. And I think, and it's slightly biased because we see him week in, week out. Yeah. But really, I don't think anybody else is coming close to those two. And yet other people seem to be in the mix with things, which is strange. He's 19. So he has a little bit of time, perhaps, that Tom doesn't have on his side. But I think this year we always knew he was a good rider. We knew he was more than just a good rider at Berwick. But I think there was a perception that he could only ride big tracks. I don't know why, because he started his career at Birmingham. And first broke onto the scene at Birmingham. But because he did Berwick, because he does Bellevue, I think he had, people would say, oh, he's a big track rider, he's good on a big track. I think this year, start of last year, he's proved that he can ride anything, basically. His gating's improved out of all recognition this year as well. And as even Greg would tell you, that actually makes things easier when you do actually get out of the gate.
Well, it was a great comment by Dan Bewley, as he was one of the commentators, and I think it was the Bellevue versus Kings Lynn, and he said, the start of the race, it's the only opportunity you get to pass all three riders at once.
Yeah. And I mean, he has a line around the outside of that first and second round at Berwick. I don't think even Chris Harris rides that line. He's very much Leon's line. And you've seen one or two people try and follow it, and they can't ride it. He's done more laps than most people around there. But he's an exciting talent, and he's got his head together as well. It's strange that he's not really scoring the points for Wolverhampton.
He scores more away from home than he does at home, doesn't he? Although the last meeting that he had, he did well, didn't he? And he actually scored, I think it was his first heat win at Wolves. And as for Drew Kemp, I thought, my goodness, he's trying so hard, and in one heat he should have won it, and he finished last or something. It's like I've seen that so often, and I always remember it was a junior race at Powder Hall, and Mark Courtney stood next to me, and he said, "Watch this guy here. He's going to end up last. He's trying that hard, but he's going to end up." Sure enough, he does, And it's like, how did you know that? He said, because I've seen it that often.
I think that's the other thing with Leon. I think when you talk to riders, they tell you how good he is. I mean, it's if I think he's good, it doesn't really matter. I'm just somebody who watches from the side. But when people who know what they're talking about say, yeah, he's the real deal, then I think so. And I think next year will be interesting. I mean, him at the under-21s this year at Birmingham, tough field. And what you don't want to do is put too much pressure on him. But let's be honest, he's going to go in there as one of the favourites. Tom Brennan's going to go in as a red-hot favourite. Mm-hmm. But Leon's going to be there or thereabouts, you would have thought. And he's got another couple of years in that under-21s, and he's got another couple of years in the Speedway Nations too. He's got, he's got a couple of really exciting years ahead of him, I think, and a lot further than that.
Well, I mean, the thing is, in the under-19 at Redcar, he was expected to win. He went and did it. It's not like he was Polish and he's expected to win and finish last. They really do bottle it at times, don't they? I don't know why that is. Weight of expectation.
I think the fact that they're brought up on Polish tracks. has a lot to do with it, and they can't adjust to riding outside Poland in the way that the lads who brought up in Denmark, they can adjust to Polish tracks. If you brought up in Britain, you can adjust to Polish tracks. The Poles don't adjust very well. It's a little bit one-dimensional, their racing. It's very good. Yeah. It can be very exciting. But again, going back to the Wolverhampton thing, you'd say, why would you want to go and ride at Wolverhampton? It's a bit of a weird trick track. And one of the answers from history is those are the sort of tracks that make you into a motorbike rider rather than just somebody who rides fast on a big flat track.
Yeah. Moving on very swiftly. I'm not going to keep you too long because I realise that we want to follow how both Bellevue and Kent and Edinburgh and Plymouth get on. So I'm not going to keep you too much longer. Any news yet on Jonas?
Well, he won't be there tomorrow night, unfortunately.
Right.
UKVI just haven't processed it. It's, I don't know, we can get political here. If you know anybody who voted for Brexit, you point in the face and say, this is what you voted for, you twit. Basically, you have a government department that's been swamped by visa applications because so many more people now need visas who didn't before. There's no conspiracy going on here. He's not disappeared. Glasgow haven't got him tucked away in under the stairs. If you read the British Speedway forum, quite simply, the poor lad is stuck. I think had he got a visa tonight, he'd have been on a plane tomorrow morning. Hopefully, it would arrive before 6:15, like Ben Basso. But and he's ready. He's ready to ride. And I suppose now what they'll try and do is they'll try and push it through so he's available for Birmingham on Wednesday night.
Sure.
So it'll be Jordan Jenkins.
I was going to say, how does that work with getting a guest because Jonas isn't allowed to ride because of his visa? Are we still allowed a guest?
Yeah, it's a National League guest at, I think, a quarter, 25% less than his average, which is how we ended up with Connor Coles at Leicester, Greg obviously last week. And I know I've seen people on some of the forums today saying, well, why aren't they doubling up with the Bullets? I think quite simply, the Bullets have an important match in the second part of tomorrow night. And to put that pressure on Greg or Luke Krang, also run the risk of them getting injured or blow an engine or two engines, and then perhaps even puts the Bullets at risk. I think in similar circumstances last year, albeit when we were using rider replacement, they used Danny Phillips as number 8 in double headers, whereas Luke and Greg had been number 8s up to then. So, Jordan Jenkins will be there. It'll be an interesting one because you've got Jordan Jenkins, Nathan Stoneman, both of whom got maximums for Oxford Chargers midweek there.
They did,
and they're up against Harry McGurk and Ben Morley, which perhaps is one of your more evenly based reserve 4s. Last week we had Brock Nichols, who's effectively America's number 3, isn't he? Riding at reserve for Glasgow and scoring a lot of points for them. So I think it's going to be more evenly matched in the reserves tomorrow. That'll be interesting and perhaps work in our favour. Hopefully,
sure. I mean, we have to remember, of course, at the start of the season when we were doing really well, we had Jai at reserve. And that was like, I think was it three meetings he went unbeaten at home?
Yeah, it was ridiculously high scoring, which then, of course, became a problem later on. It wasn't really reflected in his average when he got injured. So his replacements on average were nowhere near the sort of form he was in, especially Rowan Berwick.
Indeed,
He does like Berwick normally, although Berwick wasn't very kind to him last Saturday. We put him in the fence there. But yes, I think I mean they swapped the riding order around as well. Leon's at 4 rather than 5. I think that's we've had a weakness in 14, and it's cost us quite heavily. I think Leon now being in 14, you would expect plugs that little gap a bit, and there's been some gloom and doom about what's happened this year, but when you actually look at 3 or 4 of those home defeats, there was a swing of 3 or 4 points in it. Had we got 3 or 4 points more, we'd have won those meetings. If it's easy to say if, but I think that move by Leon, to put Leon in there, is to just bump up that little problem we've had in 14, and obviously he's available for 15. If he's on form, he'll be in 15 with Bomber, same as he has been most of the season. So, I mean, they're not prepared to do nothing. The management, they're trying to get things working, and we'll see how it goes. How it goes tomorrow.
No, ultimately, the top of the management tree is a musician, Scott Courtney, and if you're a musician, you're sort of head and shoulders above most other people. He paid me to say that.
Exactly.
Not
exactly. Yep. No, absolutely.
I had a great conversation. I had a great conversation with him recently in the Black and Gold, and it wasn't to do with Speedway. It was actually to do with his band and what sort of music they played and all that kind of stuff. And you could tell that he actually quite liked talking about something other than Speedway, and because it can get a bit OTT. I can imagine after a while, but no, I mean,
I think Scott also has a great saying. What he says is, he said, "We work just as hard in defeat as we do for a victory." And it's like, well, because they're on a losing streak doesn't mean to say they're not working hard. They're working just as hard as they were at the start of the season when we're on a winning streak. So it's there's less frustration when you're on a winning streak, but you work just as hard when you're on a losing streak.
Yeah. Okay, so final thoughts on the British final. As I say, I thought it was excellent. I would have loved to have seen all 22 when we were denied 10 heats, but I thought that racing was absolutely top-notch. What were your thoughts on the British final?
I think it's sad that what's gone on about the wild card has actually taken away from the fact that it really, really was a good Speedway meeting. And yet everybody's talking about other things, and that's such a great shame. It's what happens too much with British Speedway. I think people get involved in niggles and arguments over irrelevance, and what they forget is some of the racing is absolutely astonishingly good. And it was such a shame. It was even more of a shame because I actually think Bomber was going to win it. And certainly him and Dan Bewley in Heat 22 and whoever was in with them, that would have been some race. And I think even sadder, I think Bomber is in the sort of form where he could have done some damage at Cardiff.
Indeed,
and he's not getting a chance now.
And also, it was rather interesting. A tweet he put out about the the fact that he's not going to say anything more about it. And somebody replied with, well, as long as you're not thinking of hanging up your Kevlars anytime soon. And Bomber's reply was, I've got a lot to think about over the next few days.
Yeah.
I may be reading too much into that, but I thought that was interesting. Let's hope he decides he's gonna keep going, because I mean, the form he's on at the moment, I don't see him as the sort of person that would just suddenly pack in.
I think he's far more emotional than people realise. He on the face of it, he's a bit of a swan sometimes, where is all calm on the surface, but I think that will really, really have annoyed him last night and or Monday night, and it was a strange decision. I mean, you can explain it, you can come up with all sorts of reasoning for it. It was a strange decision altogether, and why they couldn't just have said, right, there is the top English rider and the averages, the Premiership averages, which would have been Bomber, who was one of those three. You know, there's legitimacy to saying that. I don't really see where, and yet strangely enough, you see, and Greg was one of them. You see a lot of riders having some support for the decision, which is a bit strange, I have to say.
I must admit,
I understand the riders on the night keeping their thoughts to themselves because obviously.
You still there?
Yeah. It is such a shame for Bomber because I think this is a real golden season for him. Yeah. And everything he's doing is working well. And
indeed,
I think secretly perhaps he's had that little dream of Cardiff all year.
Sure. Would have been 20 years since Cardiff started, but. Why doesn't he just keep going until 2027, and it'll be 20 years since he won it? Yep, 20 years since he won it. I better let you go because, as I say, the other Speedway is about to start. Finally, you're
do it again.
Yeah, I must admit, I'm one of those that was pleased for Adam Ellis. I was honestly pleased for him, and I messaged him to say that, and he thanked me for my message of support. I just think he's a really classy rider, and hope he goes to Cardiff and does well. Now, having been given that shot, and I hope he gets the tassels out. Finally, George, I think we're losing. I think we're losing
Adam Ellis
contact.
did nothing wrong at all, as far as I know. He's been the beneficiary of a strange bit of officialdom.
Mm-hmm. So, prediction for tomorrow?
Yes, I think the moon must be out over Berwick.
Yeah. Prediction for tomorrow: Bullets and Bandits.
Ooh. We'll have 2 wins, 48 points in both, I think.
Oh, right. So we're giving Plymouth a point.
I think we're giving Plymouth points. Yes, I actually think both sides will give us, particularly with the 2 McGurks riding for the Centurions. I think they'll give us a decent run for our money in both matches. There'll be some good racing, I think. Good racing tomorrow night. And
absolutely.
I think Bomber's going to take it out on somebody, maybe even the track record.
Well, yeah, that would be good, wouldn't it? Good, excellent. And hopefully, and I mean this in the nicest possible way. Hopefully, I won't see you at the bar on the back street tomorrow night.
Maybe in the queue together on the right side of it.
Yes, that would be good, wouldn't it?
That would be.
And maybe even in the black and gold afterwards.
You never know.
You never know. Yeah. Okay, well, George, many thanks for joining us and for having a wee chat. And can I just finish by saying once again, your articles. You are the sort of front man on the Berwick Speedway website. Yours are the ones that come up first of all. They are so informative. Great stuff to read. Absolutely brilliant stuff. As I say, I don't know how you get the time to write some of the stuff because if you're busy doing the bar, you can't. As you say, you haven't had the chance to watch much of the racing. But if you are doing the bar again. Yeah, it's easy to remember me. Just a can of Stella. We'll Yes, you do indeed. You're doing a fantastic job. Well, I would say you and all the other people that contribute to that website, because it's great that you've got yourself, and then you've got the is it Dirt Extra, and you've got Dick Barry and Sarah Shavalambas, and what's his name? Mythman. What's he on
Mr.
about?
Mr. Mither or something? Yeah, so
Mr.
he's one of the
Oh,
Mr.
yeah.
Men, isn't he? Misdemeanor or something like that. Yeah.
He's actually one of the Shady brothers.
That is one of the great things. You don't have to buy the video. You can just hear them commentating at any point in that stadium. Even on the third bend, you can hear them commentating.
Well, I've heard from Jonas Knudsen that on a good night they can actually hear him over there in Denmark, across the North Sea.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
Okay, George. Catch you later.
No problem.
Cheers. Bye for now.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.